Hello, I'm Patricia, a 32-year-old woman whose childhood was marked by the profound loss of my mother. This tragedy deepened the bond once shared with my father, who worked tirelessly to meet all my needs. The absence of my mother made me wary of my emotions, leading me to believe I might remain single forever. That was until I met Peter, a kind and determined man, now 34, introduced to me by a friend who worried about my prolonged solitude. After a year of tender courtship, Peter proposed. Now, as we prepare for our wedding, I find myself reflecting on a troubling incident that occurred at our wedding reception. In a shocking display, my in-laws, clearly under the influence and oblivious to the crowd's whispers, confronted me publicly. They demanded I prove my worthiness to the family by contributing $55,000 monthly, half my salary, claiming it was too late for objections since I was already marrying into their family. I was taken aback by their audacity to make such demands during what was meant to be a joyous celebration. As I stood there, my face pale with disbelief, my father stepped in. Taking the microphone from them, he firmly reprimanded my in-laws, reminding them of the embarrassment they were inflicting on themselves. This incident not only shocked me but also reinforced the cautious approach I've always had toward relationships. Despite the love and support from both my father and Peter, navigating these family dynamics has been an entirely new challenge. From the very beginning of our relationship, Peter's kindness and attentiveness filled me with genuine happiness. He became such an integral part of my life that I couldn't help but envision a future together. When he proposed, it felt like a natural progression for both of us. He always knew the right words to calm my anxieties. "Don't worry if you're uncertain about something. I'll be here for you until you feel more secure. I love you, Patricia. You can always count on me," he would say. His promises and reassuring presence wrapped around me like a warm blanket, deepening my affection for him. When I shared the news of our engagement with my father, his joy was overwhelming. Tears of happiness filled his eyes. "Wow, Patricia, you're finally getting married. I'm so thrilled for you," he exclaimed. I couldn't help but tease him for being so emotional, a side of him I rarely witnessed. "I used to worry you might never settle down," he confessed. Hearing his concerns was a surprise, but it underscored the deep love he had for me. His heartfelt congratulations meant the world, especially knowing the sacrifices he made while raising me alone. As Peter and I immersed ourselves in wedding planning, our lives became a flurry of activity. Work consumed our weekdays, while weekends were dedicated to organizing our special day. Free time turned into a rare commodity. Finally, we found a moment to visit Peter's parents for the first time since our engagement, eager despite our hectic schedules. As we arrived at his parents' house, a wave of nerves hit me. Peter noticed my anxiety and offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, my parents are really nice," he said, which calmed me a bit. When I rang the doorbell, it was Peter's mother who answered. "Mom, I'm home," he called out cheerfully. "Welcome home, Peter. It's wonderful to see you," she replied warmly. I followed with a polite introduction. "Nice to meet you. I'm Patricia, Peter's fiancée." However, her initial warmth towards Peter seemed to dissipate when she turned to me. The smile she offered was polite but lacked the genuine warmth she had shown her son, and her gaze held a hint of scrutiny. This subtle shift left me feeling uneasy. As we stepped into the living room, her reserved demeanor continued. With a tone more interrogative than conversational, she began. "Patricia, I'm curious about what you can offer. Peter is our treasure, our only child. If you're going to marry him, you need to be worthy of him." Her bluntness took me by surprise. I hadn't anticipated such a frosty reception from my future mother-in-law and struggled to find the right words to respond. "Remember, you'll be joining our family. Are you ready for that?" she pressed. While marrying Peter indeed meant becoming part of his family, her high expectations felt unreasonable. Peter's family wasn't a prominent or influential dynasty, and I wouldn't even be living with them. The weight of her questions was uncomfortable, leaving me feeling pressured. As I struggled to find the right words, Peter's mother grew impatient with my silence, her voice rising in frustration. "When I ask you a question, answer me right away. It's rude to keep me waiting," she pressed on, demanding. "Are you ready for this?" Overwhelmed, I managed to respond. "I hope Peter and I will support each other in our marriage." Her reply was curt and dismissive. "That's naive. Your role as a wife is to support Peter. You clearly don't understand the fundamentals." Sitting nearby, Peter's father intervened. "Honey, please calm down." He turned to me, apologetic. "I'm sorry, Patricia. I hope my wife's words didn't upset you too much." "It's okay," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. I recognized that Peter's mother was protective of her son and may have spoken out of haste. Just then, Peter's brother entered the room, his gentle tone momentarily easing my anxiety until he added, "What my wife said has some merit. What concerns me is your background, coming from a single-parent family." Confused and a bit hurt, I asked, "What do you mean?" He elaborated. "Well, being raised by just one parent doesn't exactly create the best image. We can't be thrilled about someone from such a background becoming our son's wife, can we? At that moment, I could no longer hold back. Wait a minute, what's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me alone. I'm proud of my upbringing and my father. Growing up with one parent doesn't diminish my worth. A tense silence filled the room as I stood my ground, feeling the weight of their judgments yet resolute in my values. It was clear that Peter's parents held an old-fashioned perspective, questioning my ability to be a good wife based on my upbringing. They voiced doubts about whether I had learned essential skills like managing a household. I replied firmly, I helped my father with chores all the time. I can cook well, so please don't make assumptions about me. Despite my clear explanation, they brushed off my words and proceeded to lay down conditions for our marriage. We'll allow you to marry Peter, but in return, you must promise to prioritize us as his parents. Can you promise that? Their demand left me stunned. It felt more like a transaction than a blessing. Later that evening, feeling sidelined by their domineering attitude, I decided to share my concerns with Peter. Hey, Peter, do your parents always talk to people like that? I asked, seeking some understanding. Peter seemed unfazed. What's wrong with how they talk? I was surprised that he didn't see the issue. I mean the way they spoke to me and what they said. I clarified. Peter waved it off. Oh really? They were just checking if you're ready for marriage. I know they're concerned, but I felt like their comments were a bit excessive. I pressed on. Peter, their casual tone really surprised me. Really? What did they say that was wrong? They've given us their blessing, so let's not dwell on it. Although I nodded in agreement, I couldn't shake the feeling that Peter was siding more with his parents than with me. It troubled me deeply. Sensing my discomfort, Peter pulled me into a hug, trying to reassure me. Patricia, you don't have to worry. My parents are just a bit upset because their only son is getting married, he explained. While Peter's words were meant to comfort me, they didn't fully ease my feelings of being misunderstood and somewhat isolated in this new family dynamic. I wondered how we would navigate our future together with such differing expectations from his parents. Peter tried to lighten the mood by suggesting that his parents only wanted what was best for us. They just want us to have a strong marriage like theirs, which is why they might come off as harsh, he said. I attempted to see things from his perspective, acknowledging that they might hold high expectations for us. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake the discomfort stemming from their criticisms of my upbringing. I firmly believe that our marriage should revolve around us and our mutual respect, not just about gaining approval from Peter's parents. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, our wedding day finally arrived. Walking down the aisle with my father, who had raised me alone, was an incredibly emotional moment. When Peter and I exchanged vows and rings, applause surrounded us, filling me with overwhelming joy and a profound sense of the commitment we were making. The reception buzzed with excitement, and the well wishes from friends and colleagues made it a day to remember. Despite my initial apprehensions about Peter's parents, the joy of the occasion reassured me that we had made the right decision to go ahead with our plans. After the ceremony, we eagerly anticipated the moment we would officially register our marriage. The day was filled with cherished memories, but as we prepared to greet our guests, I noticed Peter's parents were visibly intoxicated, their erratic behavior making me uneasy. An uncomfortable moment unfolded during the reception when Peter's mother, a bit too forcefully, pulled me aside. In a commanding tone, she said, Patricia, listen carefully. After this wedding, you are going to dedicate yourself entirely to us. Be ready because we will put you to the test. Some guests chuckled, assuming it was a joke. Moments later, Peter's father took the microphone, glanced at me, and remarked, Patricia, don't you feel ashamed wearing a dress like that? It really doesn't suit you. His tone was sharp, and Peter's mother added, Dear, you should tell her the truth. The atmosphere shifted. Whispers filled the room, some in disbelief, others expressing discomfort. I turned to Peter, hoping for his support and expecting him to address his parents' rude comments. To my dismay, he remained silent, later saying he couldn't intervene and didn't believe his parents were in the wrong. This response was disheartening, revealing the potential challenges we might face as a couple, especially concerning his parents' influence and our differing approaches to family conflicts. As the day progressed, I knew we would need to discuss these issues further to build a strong, united future. Amid the wedding hall's bustling atmosphere, a harsh reality set in. Peter would not shield me from his parents' harshness in the future. The situation escalated quickly when my in-laws, under the influence, continued to berate me with unreasonable demands. Well, you're married now, but to be part of this family, you need to prove you have enough money, they announced, adding, after you register your marriage, you should give us a few thousand a month from your bonus. Their audacious demands left me stunned. I never expected such behavior at our wedding reception. My face drained of color as I stood there, and my father stepped in, taking the microphone with a firm yet respectful tone. Enough of this, don't you realize how inappropriate this is? He challenged. Peter's parents shot back defiantly. Why are you interrupting us while we're speaking? They sneered. I always knew this woman's father was no good. Single parents are never any good. Anger bubbled within me, but my father remained composed, responding, "You're even worse than I thought. Refusing to meet me simply because I'm a single father is shameful. I never expected such bigotry from people associated with a respected figure. I would expect more decency from employees of President Donald." The mention of President Donald seemed to rattle my father-in-law. "How do you know President Donald?" he asked, his tone shifting to one of concern. "He's a business partner of my company and, more importantly, an old friend," my father clarified. "And speaking of single parents, President Donald himself was raised by a single mother, so your comments have inadvertently insulted the president of the company you work for." As realization dawned on their faces, the gravity of their blunder became evident. My father-in-law's demeanor shifted from assertive to pleading as he dropped to his knees. "I apologize, sir. Please don't mention this to the president," he begged, his earlier bravado evaporating in the face of potential consequences. This sudden shift highlighted not only the thoughtlessness of their earlier remarks but also the respect my father commanded. As the night unfolded, I contemplated the complex dynamics of our newly extended family and the role I would navigate within it. Amid the unfolding drama, my father-in-law looked utterly defeated, and the guests couldn't help but react. Some laughed, others captured the moment on their phones. Standing by his principles, my dad replied firmly, "Apologies can't undo what's been said." He then approached me quietly, asking if I wanted to leave with him. I nodded, taking the microphone from Peter's hand. "Thank you all for the entertainment, but there will be no wedding," I announced decisively, addressing Peter, his parents, and the guests at the reception. "I will ensure that all gifts and contributions for this occasion are returned." With those final words, I exited the hall alongside my father. As we left the hall, I caught a glimpse of Peter and his parents, their faces etched with shock and dismay. Relatives quickly gathered around them, their expressions filled with concern. The fallout from that night was swift. As I returned the gifts and recounted the situation, many guests expressed their sympathy, commending my father and me for standing up against such unacceptable behavior. They appreciated our integrity in refusing to be manipulated by offensive demands. However, the incident had a broader impact. It reverberated through Peter's professional life as well. Colleagues who attended the wedding began to view him differently, tarnishing his reputation due to his failure to defend me against his parents' unreasonable actions. The embarrassment became so overwhelming that Peter felt he had no choice but to resign from his position. Meanwhile, the president of the company where my father-in-law worked caught wind of the debacle. The consequences were severe. Peter's father was demoted and reassigned to a less prestigious role in a remote office. Additionally, Peter's family faced social repercussions, becoming somewhat ostracized by relatives due to the scandal. It was an unfortunate series of events, but sometimes, the consequences of one's actions are inescapable. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding and strengthening my relationship with my dad. We've been spending more quality time together, finding comfort and support in each other's company. After navigating such turbulent waters, this upheaval in my personal life has deepened my appreciation for everything he has done for me. One day, he invited me for a heart-to-heart conversation that took an unexpected turn. "Patricia, have you ever thought about taking over the business?" he asked, his face filled with hope. Caught off guard, I hesitated. "Are you suggesting I trailed off, unsure of where he was leading. He smiled slightly. "Why don't you work towards becoming the president of my company?" It was a significant proposal, and his tone made it clear he believed I was ready for the challenge. "I'll do my best," I promised, excitement and nerves swirling within me. After reflecting on my recent experiences, I decided to focus on advancing my career at my dad's company, putting romantic pursuits on hold for the time being. I wanted to prove to both myself and my father that I could excel and perhaps even become a great leader like him. Currently, I am fully dedicated to learning all aspects of the business. The work is demanding yet immensely rewarding, and I'm eager to embrace every opportunity that comes my way. The ordeal at the wedding highlighted just how unreasonable Peter's parents had been, turning what should have been a beautiful celebration into a spectacle. Thankfully, since the marriage was never legally finalized, I avoided a potentially disastrous entanglement. Now free from marital commitments and in-law complications, I can concentrate entirely on my professional ambitions. It's liberating to have found clarity after such a tumultuous period. I'm optimistic about the future and excited about the prospect of leading the company one day. Thank you for taking the time to follow my story to its conclusion. If you found something meaningful in it, please consider subscribing. I look forward to sharing more updates and insights with you in the future.